This is CounselCast, part of the Legal Talk Network, and I'm your host, Karen Conroy. When you face a complex case outside your expertise, you bring in a co-counsel for next-level results. When you want to engage, expand, and elevate your firm, you bring in a marketing co-counsel. In this podcast, I bring in marketing experts who each answer one big question to help your firm achieve more. Here's today's guest.
Hi, I'm Mary Henderson, and I help industry experts commercialize and systemize and digitalize their knowledge, wisdom, and skill set into a brand and a six-figure plus coaching or a consulting business.
Mary, thank you for being here today. This is going to be a great conversation. And here's why. I think that this personal branding is something that's kind of a foreign concept for most lawyers. It's not something that, unless you're a marketing person, that I think a lot of people are familiar with, especially lawyers. So we're going to tie it in. We're going to talk about what it is, tie it in, but then tie it into business and what that means for your bottom line and why you should care about all of that stuff. So it's not just that kind of woo-woo, conversation. We're going to talk about why it matters. So today's big question is going to be, why are lead generation and personal branding two sides to the same coin? So thank you for being here. We know that you are internationally recognized personal branding coach. So this is your area of expertise. This is the things that you talk about all the time. So let's talk about first, what do you mean by personal branding, and what is that?
Great question, Karen. The most simplistic form of personal branding is you, the human, are the business. And let's think about this for a moment. Whether you're a lawyer, as an employee, or a lawyer as the principal of the organization, or whether you're an influencer or an entrepreneur, people buy from people. Let's never forget that. And we actually forget that when I'm buying an Apple computer, I'm buying it from a human. I'm not buying it from Apple as in an entity, a robot. I'm buying it from a human being. So we have to come back to that level of humanization and understand that in an organization, there are lots of humans that are essentially walking brands, because every one of us have uniqueness. We all have individual gifts, individual talents, individual value systems, passions, things that we can do with ease and grace that other people can't do. Could you imagine, Karen, packaging that, not a job description, packaging who each individual is in their truest form of their natural state of being, and turning that into a brand rather than a job description? Could you imagine the difference that would make in an organization? So that in its simplest form is my explanation.
So are you suggesting that people should kind of think in terms of a personal brand instead of a job description when they're kind of thinking in terms of hiring?
When I was in corporate and I was VP of sales and I had a massive sales team, we ditched our job descriptions and every single person in that team became a brand.
Oh,
it wasn't
wow.
a coincidence that we turned that business from 4 million into 54 million in a 48-month period. Was that a coincidence?
No.
Yeah. What happened was that every individual was allowed to be unapologetically themselves every day. And what I did is I matched the persona with the portfolio. So there was banter that the client and the salesperson could feed off each other's energies. And it was just the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. And that was, 20 years ago.
Okay, so let's break down some of these marketing ideas in terms of what does it mean to match that persona to the portfolio? So I'm thinking of a traditional kind of job description, like you will perform the following tasks and show up from 9 to 5 and do the following things, and these are the metrics that we care about. How do you then convert that into a persona?
Well, the thing is that what we do in a job description, Karen, is we look at half of a person, not the 24-hour version of the person. So that's the very first thing, because I want to know what your passions are outside of 9 to 5.
Yeah.
For example, let me give you an example. This is actually a really good example. What if I am passionate about cooking and in my spare time, I've created a YouTube cooking show? Okay, it's a hobby. I'm not monetizing. I might be making a little bit of money because I'm getting a lot of people watching my videos. But can you just see the skill in that?
Yeah.
Like just that in itself, the skill of actually understanding videography, understanding how to create a story, how to create beautiful photography, just being able to articulate yourself on camera, understanding social media, and learning from your mistakes and what you can, making your videos better and better. Imagine me taking that knowledge into my organization. Do you think that it would be of value to the organization?
Of course.
Now, but also, let's look at that person who is really comfortable with being in front of a camera. Could that person then be a brilliant negotiator, or the person because when I had my sales team, if somebody was brilliant at presenting, I would get them to buddy up. And I would say, look, this person is way more powerful at presenting. Get that person to come in, do the presentation, and you support them with your skill, which is negotiation. So together, you're working for the same company. No one's going to take the sale away from you, but now we're collaborating. Now we're working like a real team. It's not about me, it's about us. So they're the sort of things that I look at. So the persona in personal branding terms is, how do I want the outside world to perceive me? How do I want the outside world to feel about me? How do I want the outside world to remember me? So all of these aspects of me as a brand really matter if I want to be known for something and remembered at the same time.
So I have so many questions about that, but the first one is, when you're thinking in terms of a persona, is this a personality test, or is it something that you can craft? So if you're an attorney and you really want to be known for a certain thing, and maybe you're building that up and you're not necessarily known for that yet, is that something you can craft, or is it more like, we are going to tap into the skills that you have already embedded in you, and we have to find that skill and build on it, and if it's not there, we're not going to pay attention to it, or how does that work?
They're two separate things, actually.
Okay.
Because when I'm looking at a skill set, I'm looking at a specialization. What is it that I can do for sure? Okay. So that's the very first thing, because what we do is we just look at skill set, as a person that's working as a lawyer, for example. The skill set is just one part of that human's abilities. Okay. So it's important. It's absolutely critical. But then we've got other attributes as well. Well, what about your values? How does that fit in? What about your story? What does that story look like? That's actually made up of not just skills. The story is made up of knowledge, skills that becomes your wisdom. So when I'm investing in a lawyer, I'm investing in the wisdom. I don't care about your skills. I know you've got the skills. I don't want you to tell me, well, look, I'm a brilliant negotiator. I'm great. I don't want to know that. I already know that you've put your hard work in and your studies. You've probably had 15, 20 years of experience. I'm buying your wisdom. That's actually what I want. So we have to separate the skills with, this is what I know how to do for sure. And the other side, the persona, a personality test actually does help, sort of, kind of. It becomes a part of the process. But I like to define my persona based on an archetype, or even, you can look at things like, actors or actresses that you mainly resonate with. What is it about that person that you resonate with? Is it the way that they dress? Is it the way that they articulate themselves? Is it the colors that they wear? We have to create the persona that matches who we are in our natural state of being. So, for example, I may like Madonna, for example, but I don't want to be Madonna. Like, I don't want the outside world to see me as Madonna, God forbid. But
yeah, it would be kind of an interesting sales pitch.
You get the point. It has to be, you've got to put things in context. And also, It has to be palatable. You want people to be able to connect with you first and foremost from a heart level, not from a head level, because the heart is where the persona starts. It's, I feel like this when I'm with you. I love the way that you look. I love the language that you look. The persona is made up of so many different aspects. And all these things that I'm mentioning here are all critical parts of the process. There's language that I use as part of my ecosystem, if you will, as part of my persona, as part of my brand. That's really exclusive to me because it makes sense. It's in context. Somebody else may use it. I've had some of my clients that use my language and I'm like, listen, that's just not going to work for you. Like, that's just wrong on so many levels.
It's like wearing the wrong outfit. It's like wearing somebody else's clothes or yeah.
So, Karen, it's all about connecting at that soul core heart level because that's where the conversation starts. The connection always starts from there, especially when we look at a personal brand and it's all about the human. We've got to take it back to the heart first.
Okay, so we're starting to define all of these things that are at the core of the experiences that we've had and this persona. But then what does that have to do with lead generation? And I know that I've read some of your work and you talk a lot about how you don't start with lead generation. So how do they work together and what does this persona have to do with that?
Well, this is a great question because so many people that are in business, the first thing is, I've got to get the sale. I need to get clients. I've got to build my business. Okay. So that is the wrong place to start. It's the wrong attitude and it will backfire. I actually call that an uphill battle. Yeah. Now let's think about this for a moment. I want to break this down for your audience. If I don't know who I am as a brand, how do I get my messaging right? That's step number one. What is the language I'm going to use to be able to start that conversation with my target audience? For example, this is what I do with absolute clarity. This is who I serve with absolute clarity. This is what I promise with absolute clarity. That falls under branding. Yeah. That does not fall under lead generation. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And then we move down and also understanding my color palettes, my look, my feel, my tone, my voice. What does my entire architecture look like? What's my brand truth? So what are the things that I'm going to be talking about, on social media, off social media, on a keynote, a panel discussion, podcast interviews? What are the things that I want to be known for? All of that falls under your brand.
Right.
So if I don't clarify all of that architecture and build that solid foundation, my lead generation should always be the effect of that cause. Always, always. But what people do is they make the lead generation the cause and everything else the effect. Can you see that there's no connection?
Yeah.
And so it becomes an uphill battle. So if I want to wrap a layered lead generation strategy when I'm working with a client, I've got no choice but to go through that process, defining your personal brand essence, understanding what your solution looks like truly, building the digital assets to support all of that. So you're believable, you're trustable, so you can give people an ecstatic brand experience. Then we go to the lead generation strategy because that's the effect of all of that amazing work. And it becomes so easy to draw, or what I would say, pull the right people into your ecosystem and start the right conversation because that person knows exactly what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking of two different examples while you were talking. There's a lot of clients that will approach us and the first thing they want to start with is SEO because they've heard so much about it. It's sort of this mystery thing that nobody really understands too much about. And so it seems like maybe there's a golden ticket there. But they've been burned. Oftentimes they've been burned by other SEO providers in the past. And it's so easy for me to see that, you just throw out all of this. It's like putting the cart before the horse because you are throwing out all of these ideas. And, I often will tell them, just ranking is not the end goal. Just because you rank well on Google, then what happens? Then they land on your website and your website is a mess and you don't know what you're saying. And then the second example is, okay, let's say they actually do pick up the phone and call you. what are you going to say? When they ask you, why should I hire you? What is your answer? You have not figured this stuff out yet. And so then it's a bad experience all the way around, and then you're stumbling. And so you have to have all of these steps in place before someone is going to land on the website, before someone is going to pick up the phone. You kind of have to back into all of these things that you need before you open up your doors to start then having people call you and ask these questions. It makes so much sense, but I feel like there's a lot of places that just kind of, a lot of people just start opening a firm and they don't really know what the right sequence is. And so it does seem like, okay, well, I'll just start by trying to get some money and some clients in the door, because that seems like the most desperate need, but it really is not step one.
I agree with you. And also the thing is that if you can't articulate what you do, who you serve, and what you promise in one sentence, then how do you actually show up in the world and sell your services if you can't actually do that? Like, that is the number one rule. And I always think of this idea, Karen, this notion of being at a dinner party, you're sitting next to somebody who you've never met before, and they turn to you, like most people would do, and say, what do you do? What is it that you do? And you'll say, well, today I'm this and tomorrow I'm that. And by the way, did I tell you that I'm also, and you're like, oh my God, 45 minutes later, get me out of here. Right? Wouldn't it be better to say, hey, what do you do? I'm a personal branding specialist. Oh, wow, what's that? I help, industry experts. And then I go into my spiel. It takes me 10 seconds. Yeah. And then it starts a much more meaningful conversation.
Yeah. And it's not just, the answer should not just be, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a lawyer in X city. There should be, like you described, it has to talk about who you help and answer all of those questions so that it's like you said, a more meaningful conversation. I think that's really valuable. Just starting with that elevator pitch, I feel like a lot of people, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to and have come on the podcast and they don't even have that piece together. And it's like, okay, let's spend an extra 5 minutes here today and help you out with that. So it's all those critical step one pieces that, yeah, right, exactly. So tell us more about, okay, we've got this idea that we need to not start with the lead generation. We start with the personal branding, and then that leads towards step two, which is the lead generation, because you now have this understanding of who you're serving, what kind of problems you solve. You've got that messaging, and it's all the pieces are coming together. So what are some examples of, I'm sure you've worked with companies that weren't starting from step one, that maybe had some experience, didn't have these things in the right place, and then you came in and helped them really reposition and get the right pieces in place. How did that change just their whole process and their business and how things were kind of flowing through?
I think that the thing that I do really well is I extract from an individual their accumulated knowledge, wisdom, and skills. So most lawyers will have thousands of hours of accumulated knowledge, wisdom, and skills. And I like to take that internal inventory and break it down into what I call a methodology. Because just think about this, in a firm, a legal firm, you may specialize in, say, family law, and that's all you do, but there are other firms that have multiple specializations. Wouldn't it be more compelling to actually have individuals actually talk to a client about their specialization in the form of how they approach it, their process or system or their phases, however they want to describe it? Because then what you're looking at is you've got a firm, look at it as a circle, and in that circle it's made up of different types of attorneys. Imagine if every attorney had a real specialization. You've now got a perfect circle because you've got lots of wisdom in that ecosystem. It's very, very powerful. When we get to the lead generation strategy, I like layered lead generation strategies. And my focus is very much on organic reach, because I think that organic reach is very powerful. And then to support that with paid advertising, it makes it even more potent. But I love organic because it's where I can actually have the capacity and the ability and the opportunity to connect with people at a much deeper level. And so when we have a layered lead generation approach, we become omnipresent in the eyes of our target audience. And what people do wrong, Karen, is they want to be everywhere today. So they want to, target 1 billion people, and they want to be famous, and and they just think that it just happens overnight. But you see, that's the wrong attitude to have. I don't need 1 billion people. I only need my target audience. I need to understand where they hang out, and that's it. And just be in front of them. Period. I do not need to be everywhere. I just need to know that they're in these Facebook groups. They listen to these type of podcasts. They're on here on LinkedIn. They belong on these, places on LinkedIn. They go to these type of events. So I want to be in front of that audience, knowing where they hang out. And that's where lead generation needs to actually start. We have to really dig deep and understand with absolute clarity, where is my target audience, and how do I use all of these amazing platforms that are available to me so I can get in front of them? And then what is my message? What is my core message that I want to take to the world? Because I want to be known as the go-to expert in just that one area that I know for sure. I don't want to be a little bit of cryptocurrency today, personal branding tomorrow, weight loss the day after, spirituality 4 days later. Just stay in your lane, because when you're in your lane, you become 2 keywords I use all the time: believable and trustable.
Oh, that's so good. And I recently spoke to someone who was talking about the cost of all of that wasted focus too. So I feel like this is almost another area that we should talk about in terms of, not just stay in your lane, but the negative cost of trying to go too big, and then the negative, the opposite of niche or however you choose to pronounce that word. That everyone has this idea, like you said, of going giant, looking at the 1 billion people, being an influencer and having millions of followers. But if you are an attorney that works with truck accidents, that is who you're looking for. And if you are suddenly getting thousands of calls for people who are calling about 1 million other things that are unrelated, there's a cost, and there's a negative effect of all of those things. So looking at it in terms of a revenue loss, because you're not focused, is even a more specific and targeted way of thinking about it. Because I think so many people get worried that if they're too narrowly focused, that there's less money there. And so they get worried that, that they're going to make less money. But we all know that that's just not how it works.
I just even with my own example, I'm in my the elevator pitch. I used to always say I work with coaches, consultants, and business owners, and I just found that I used that for years, and then I thought, I don't work with those people. I work with industry experts, because I was able to narrow down those 3 types of people, and the people that I work with, they self-identify as an industry expert. Whether you're in corporate or whether you are a coach or a consultant or a business owner, you still would consider yourself as an industry expert. So when you get clarity like that, what also happens on that note is that you actually also remove the tire kickers. This is exactly what happened with me. It was like all the people that I did not want to serve were just gone. They disappeared. But the people that I could serve, I could start a mature conversation with. It was meaningful and deep, and it was a business conversation. It wasn't about what you wanted to hear. It was very much targeted towards those people that want to take radical action. So when you can actually refine your messaging and your target audience just in the language that you use, it really is a game changer. And you're right, niche, whatever. I actually don't even use that language, to be perfectly frank, because I think that if you're an industry expert, you're not looking for a niche or a niche. You already know who needs your solution. Yeah. So start a conversation with those people only.
And I found for myself, when a project or an experience isn't going well, it's usually because they weren't quite in the right bucket in the beginning. So
100%.
for some reason, there was a rule that I broke for myself, where in that initial intake, for some reason, we had a conversation, and oftentimes I'm close to saying no, and then I backpedal for some reason, and I always regret it. And I always come back later and find out that, oh no, I was right from the beginning. That wasn't quite the right fit. And it's not that either one of us, either one of us is a bad person, or it just wasn't the right fit for either one of us. So for all of those reasons, it's so important to really be careful in your definition of all of these things, and then to stick with that once you've defined these things about who you work with, who you don't work with, and kind of narrow those things down so that you've got the greatest clients, and you're doing the best work and all the things that you're aiming to do, because there's only so much time in the day.
Well, exactly. And the other thing is that, if I can just mention here, it's about setting benchmarks, like really clear benchmarks. For example, one of my benchmarks is that if you don't have 10,000 hours of accumulated knowledge, wisdom, and skill set, I don't want to work with you. Yeah. Like, I'm very clear on that. That's the line. And that's why I have those benchmarks, because then I always attract the right people.
Yeah.
And one more thing, Karen, if I can just mention, under the banner of personal branding, one area that's really important is understanding your value system. So that also becomes a benchmark as well. If somebody's not going to align with my company values or my personal values, then I have to draw a line and say, this is just not going to feel right.
Yeah.
We've got to incorporate all of these aspects of who we are and be true to that.
Yes. Yeah. That's so, and it just comes back to that so often. And yeah. I say that all the time, and I still have to remind myself all the time. It just keeps coming back. And, it's just a lesson that we learn over and over and over. All right. So Mary, I know you have a whole bunch of books that you wanted to recommend. So what are the books that you wanted to suggest to the audience that are great books that they should read?
Well, I've got 3. So the first one is The Essential Path by Neil Donald Walsh. So anyone that wants to go a little bit deeper on the inside, it's such a great book. I've actually got it on Audible. I listen to it all the time. I just love it. The other 2 are more on the business side. One is Contagious by Jonah Berger, and the other one is Influence by Robert Cialdini, which is an amazing book for anyone that wants to, create impact and also sales. That's just amazing for sales.
I've read Influence, and it was so great because, like you said, it describes how to. We hear the term thought leader all the time, but this really does get to the heart of what a lot of attorneys are aiming for, is to not just be that expert, but be that thought leader, or the kind of industry expert that you were describing before also, where you've got to a certain level of your career and your expertise. You've got this, tons of hours of experience in a certain thing. And now, what are the next steps for you? How do you get to those next steps? How do you expand that out more broadly? And then what does that mean business-wise as well? How do you bring that in terms of strategy and business and all of that stuff? So those are great. We will link to all of those on the show notes and the show page as well, so that everyone can go out and get those books. So what's one big takeaway that you would like our listeners to get from this episode?
I think that, what I always say to people is, don't look at personal branding as being famous, because that is the wrong terminology. And also it has a negative connotation associated to it. We are not talking here about, being Instagram famous. That is far from this conversation. We're looking at this from a mature conversation, people that genuinely have accumulated a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom and skill set. And the thing that I always like to say is, what do you do with that? Does it just become a sheer memory? And then, so what do you do with that? The other thing, another layer on top of that is, look at that internal inventory as a way to bring value into the world, like more positive value. Have a mission-driven purpose, leave a legacy. You can only do that with accumulation of knowledge, wisdom, and skill set, because that is the true currency. It's the truest form of currency that we have access to. We've got dollars, we've got gold, we've got silver, but your knowledge, wisdom, and skill never depreciates, and it's always with you. No one can ever steal it from you. So that's kind of that's the final note that I would like to leave.
Yeah, I think that is so great. Stop looking at the number of followers and all of those things. Like you said, those really do depreciate in value, over time. That is the last thing anybody's going to care about. But that knowledge, and that comes really back to the heart of what so many attorneys are aiming for, to find that meaning in their work and to find that legacy of what all of that hours of work, what is that going to mean in the long term? So that is so valuable. So thank you so much for being here, Mary. That was so valuable. We will link to your website, all of your work, the books that you mentioned. And Mary Henderson is the internationally recognized personal branding coach. Thanks again so much for being here.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the CounselCast podcast. Be sure to visit our website at counsel-cast.com for the resources mentioned on the episode and to give us your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.